Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg is pushing back against calls for a company breakup, insisting the government shouldn't, quote, take a big hammer to the social network. And with us now to discuss is Yahoo Finance tech editor Dan Howley. So no hammer, like what kind of tool should be used here?
Sickle. A sickle, like he's socialist commie. No.
Wow.
Yeah, he basically sat in on the Aspen Ideas Festival and had a conversation with a law professor from Harvard Law and was questioned vigorously about breaking up Facebook. He was clearly bothered by some of these questions. His reactions were, he kind of got like, my parents call it a puffy face when my dad gets upset. Mm-hmm. He makes this kind of like, he scrunches his lips up, but they basically said to him, why shouldn't we break up Facebook? And his argument is that Facebook can better handle the problems that are facing it as a larger company. They have the resources to do things like handle misinformation, handle privacy issues, which will, kind of not really, handle innovation. They say that they're better off, Instagram and WhatsApp are better off that Facebook acquired them because they were able to put the resources behind it so that now they're these multi-million user companies. And he really does have a point. He does. Breaking up Facebook would be a difficult task, and the fact that they are so large means that they'll be able to address their problems. The problem with that is they have to actually address those problems. Now, that's really where all of these politicians should be going when they make these calls to break it up. Have privacy regulation, have some kind of understanding of what types of speech should be allowed on these platforms. And I think it really comes down to, and Andy and I've talked about this a couple of times, where these companies need to take a stand on where speech, free speech starts and where hate speech begins. Mm-hmm. I think that's something that they're still too scared to do. And he really punted on a couple of those issues at this talk. He basically said, the government needs to take care of Russian misinformation. So, it's your platform, though.
Right.
Get it off there.
Yeah. I mean, that argument that we have the scale to cope with it is a little bit faulty in the sense that you have the scale right now and you haven't done a very good job. Mm-hmm. So there's that problem. And it's very interesting. I mean, when I was out there talking to some executives at Facebook recently, and we talked about how, the problems on the platform are like crime. You're not going to get rid of them completely. Mm-hmm. And so how you want to reduce it to what level? And you need to spend X amount of money to get there. So it's a real sort of calculus that's interesting. I also think that I never understand, of course I understand, but I never understand why CEOs are not more willing to break a company up. I mean, why the heck not? The shareholders own it. Don't you want to maximize value? Oh, there's an ego problem. That's the problem.
Well, I mean, he would probably would he still get to control like every company? No, but he'd still keep stock in it. I mean, I don't know exactly how it would all go out. I kind of took some of his argument to mean that he thought, because he was also calling for the government to come in.
Yeah.
And like, oh, we can't do it, it's too hard. But you guys, you should figure out how to do it. And it's gonna be easier for you to do it if we're together.
Yeah.
That was sort of like the logic I was taking from it, that the government's job, which you guys need to do, will be easier, but we have to stay together.
I think one of the things that's interesting is they keep saying, and he said repeatedly, this is why I've called for regulation, this is why I've called for regulation. But the reason why he's calling for regulation is so he can have a seat at the table when that regulation is crafted, and so that they're not, put out when they finally craft whatever kind of privacy or data rights laws that they end up passing. He wants to make sure that Facebook has a hand in crafting it so it helps them get basically out from underneath it. I think the issue with deepfakes is another thing that he brought up at one point. That, I think, is completely ridiculous. I've been thinking about this all day. It's basically paralysis by analysis at this point with him, because he constantly says, well, you have to think about this part as well. And I understand that you're a platform with 2 billion users, but at a certain point, when you have, potentially the President of the United States saying, oh, and we just launched an airstrike in Iran, which, could very well happen now that they have this kind of technology, not the launch, but the faking that. I think that at that point you have to say, we're going to take stuff like that down. And right now, all they're doing is saying, we'll have our fact checkers flag it and we'll put a note that says that this is false. Frankly, that's not enough. If you want to stop the spread of misinformation on your platform, which you've said is a quality of life issue on your platform, then you have to make the moves to do it. And they're really not making the moves.
The stock up just about 0.6% today. Dan Howley, thank you so much.